The whir of the blender was my new alarm clock. It cut through the quiet of our Oakwood Estates home every morning at 7:15. A sharp, jarring sound that felt more like a warning than a wake-up call. I padded into the kitchen, the cool hardwood floor under my feet. Michael stood at the counter, his back to me, shoulders squared in that crisp, button-down shirt he wore even on Saturday mornings. The blender groaned to a stop. Morning. Sleepyhead, he said without turning around, his voice all smooth caramel. He poured the thick, murky green liquid from the blender carafe into a tall glass. It didn't look like any juice I'd ever seen. It looked swampy. Morning, I replied, trying to inject some warmth into my voice. Another masterpiece? He finally turned, holding the glass out to me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. They were the color of slate. Always assessing. The best one yet. Kale, spinach, wheatgrass, a pinch of spirulina, and a special booster blend I found, packed with everything you need. Your vitamin levels are going to be off the charts. Danny, I took the glass. It was cold. Condensation already beating. A special booster blend? What's in that? Just some concentrated extracts, antioxidants, trace minerals, the good stuff. He waved a dismissive hand, his sign that the conversation about ingredients was over. He'd been doing that a lot lately. Drink up. It's most effective on an empty stomach. I brought the glass to my lips. The smell hit me first, earthy, pungent, with a sharp, almost metallic undertone. I took a sip. It was bitter, intensely so, with a weird, chemical aftertaste that made the back of my throat tighten. I fought not to gag. Wow, that's potent. That's the potency you're tasting, he said, leaning against the counter, watching me, always watching. The good stuff isn't supposed to taste like candy. Danielle, it's medicine, preventive medicine. I know. For my health. I forced another swallow. It was like drinking liquid lawn clippings, mixed with pennies. It's just a really strong flavor today. Stronger than yesterday. His smile tightened. You said that yesterday, and the day before. Your palate just needs to adjust. You've been living on coffee and those sugary yogurt parfaits. Your body is craving real nutrients. He crossed his arms. Is it really so hard to drink something that's good for you? For us? I'm doing this for you, so we can have a long, healthy life together. And there it was, the guilt, served fresh alongside the swamp juice. How do you argue with that? I'm doing this for you. For us. I appreciate it. Michael, really? I took a bigger gulp, just to get it over with. The vile liquid burning a path down to my stomach. It's just an acquired taste. I guess. Exactly. He pushed off the counter and came over, planting a kiss on my forehead. His cologne, something expensive and woody, mingled with the sour juice smell. Finish every drop. I've got a busy day, meeting the Harrisons about their renovation plans at 9. You'll be okay? I'll be fine. Just some client mock-ups to finish. I was a freelance graphic designer. My office was the sunroom, a world away from Michael's high-stakes architect firm. Good. He gave my shoulder a squeeze, his hand lingering a beat too long. Don't forget, every drop. I'll know. He said it like a joke, but his eyes held that flinty look again. He grabbed his briefcase and was out the door, leaving me in the sudden, heavy silence of the kitchen. I looked down at the glass, 3/4 full. The green liquid seemed to shimmer under the recessed lights. Oh no, I carried it to the sink, my heart doing a stupid little thump against my ribs. I hesitated, then poured it down the drain, watching the thick sludge disappear. A wave of relief, immediately followed by a prickling unease. Why was I hiding this? It was just juice. Bad juice. I ran the water to wash the residue away, scrubbing the glass clean until it sparkled. As I set it in the drying rack, my phone buzzed on the counter. Sarah, I answered, pressing the phone to my ear. Hey, you. Hey, yourself. You sound tense. What's up? Michael already on your case about his 5-year lawn fertilization plan? Sarah's voice was a lifeline, brash and real. I let out a short laugh. No, just the daily health elixir. Oh God, the swamp water. Did you drink it? Some of it. Some of it. Danielle, you poured it out, didn't you? I glanced at the empty sink. Maybe. It tastes like he's blending up his gym socks. Sarah, there's something off about it. And he gets so intense if I don't gulp it down with a smile. So tell him to stop making it. You're a grown woman. You can choose your own breakfast beverages. It's not that simple. He's invested. He did all this research. He says my energy's been low, that I need this. He framed it like a romantic gesture at first. Let me take care of you. Sarah snorted. Romantic? Handing you a glass of punishment every morning? That's not romance. That's a weird power play. Next, he'll be monitoring your fiber intake. He's just being Michael. Meticulous. Goal-oriented. I was parroting his words, the ones he used to describe himself. I leaned against the counter, the cool quartz seeping through my pajama top. Goal-oriented. Towards what? Turning you into the picture of health against your will. Look, I'm just saying, be careful. This controlling stuff, it starts small. Like with juice. He's not controlling. I said, too quickly. He's concerned. Okay, I'll drop it. For now. But if that juice starts tasting like almonds, call me immediately. Almonds? You know. Cyanide? Tastes like almonds? Never mind. Bad joke. I'm just saying. It's weird. You think it's weird. That's why you poured it out. She had me there. Yeah, I do. We chatted for a few more minutes about her latest dating disaster before hanging up. The kitchen felt bigger, emptier after her call. A weird power played at Sarah's. Words echoed. Was it? Michael was successful, handsome. He'd swept me off my feet 2 years ago with his certainty. His plans. He had a plan for everything. Our retirement fund, the landscaping schedule, our future children's college savings. I'd found it reassuring, stable. Now, sometimes, it just felt suffocating. I needed air. I needed to not be in this spotless, museum-like kitchen. I walked to the sunroom, my sanctuary. My laptop sat on the desk, surrounded by sketches and color palettes for a boutique bakery's logo. This was my space, my mess. Michael rarely came in here. He said the creative chaos gave him anxiety. I tried to focus on the curves of a proposed croissant icon, but my mind kept drifting back to the blender, to Michael's expectant face. I'll know. Shaking my head, I pulled up a browser window. I typed slowly. Spirulina tastes metallic. The results were mostly health blogs extolling its virtues. A few forums mentioned a mineral taste. I tried wheatgrass bitter aftertaste. Nothing that matched the intense chemical bitterness I'd experienced. My fingers hovered over the keys. Then I typed, "Can vitamins taste poisonous?" It was a stupid search. The results were a mix of medical articles about overdoses and paranoid forum threads. I closed the window, feeling foolish. Sarah's bad joke was getting to me. The day passed in a blur of work. I finished the bakery mock-ups, sent them off, and tried to ignore the low-grade headache forming behind my eyes. I hadn't had my coffee. Michael had gently suggested I cut back, citing the juice as a cleaner source of energy. By late afternoon, the headache was a persistent thrum. I was in the kitchen, searching for aspirin, when I heard the garage door hum open. Michael was home early. I quickly shoved the aspirin bottle back in the cabinet and turned just as he walked in. He looked tired, but his gaze went immediately to the drying rack, to the single, spotless glass. "Long day?" I asked, stepping forward to kiss his cheek. The Harrisons are indecisive monsters. He sighed, dropping his briefcase. Then he looked at me, his eyes sharp. "So, how are you feeling after your superfuel? Any more energy?" "A bit." I lied. The headache pulsed. "It's growing on me." "Good. He walked to the blender, still on the counter from the morning. He opened the lid, peered inside, and ran a finger along the glass rim. His back was to me. You know, I was reading that for the phytonutrients to be fully absorbed, the juice really needs to be consumed immediately. It loses potency fast. My blood went cold. He'd cleaned the blender this morning. I'd watched him. There was nothing in there to see. I drank it right away. I said, my voice steady, belying the sudden chill in my veins. He turned, his expression unreadable. He placed the lid back on. I believe you, Danny. It's just a big investment. You know, the organic produce, the high-grade supplements. I want to make sure it's not going to waste. I want to make sure you're getting the benefit. I am, I whispered. He walked over and cupped my face, his thumb stroking my cheek. His hands were always so cool. I just worry about you. You work so hard. You forget to take care of yourself. Let me do that for you. Okay. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. His eyes searched mine, looking for something: belief, submission, gratitude. Okay, he finally said, satisfied. He dropped his hand. I'm going to change. Then how about I grill some salmon? We'll have a nice, healthy dinner. No compromises. Sounds perfect. I managed. He left the room. I stood rooted to the spot, staring at the blender. The setting sun streamed through the window, glinting off its stainless steel base. It looked innocent, just a kitchen appliance. But in that moment, it felt like the most ominous thing in the house. He hadn't asked if I'd finish the juice. He'd made a statement about its potency fading, a test, and I'd lied. The problem was, I was starting to think he'd known I would. The real question, the one that coiled in my gut like a cold snake, was why? Why did my husband, the man who promised to love and cherish me, care more about the contents of a blender carafe than the look in my eyes when I drank from it? The next morning, the blender's roar felt like a physical assault. I walked into the kitchen, my stomach already clenched in anticipation. Michael was there, same stance, same focused expression as he poured another glass of murky green liquid. Morning, sweetheart, he said, his voice dripping with a false warmth that set my teeth on edge. Feeling brighter today? I added an extra scoop of the booster blend. For a real kick, he handed me the glass. It looked even darker than yesterday. A kick. Huh, I said, forcing a lightness I didn't feel. What exactly is in this booster blend? Michael? It has a distinct flavor. I'd love to know what I'm tasting. His smile didn't falter, but his eyes narrowed just a fraction. It's a proprietary mix. Danny, a blend of adaptogenic herbs and superfood concentrates. Ashwagandha, maca root, that kind of thing. The company guards the exact formula. Why? Does it taste off to you again? He leaned in, his gaze intense. Your system might just be extra sensitive. We should monitor that. The way he said monitor made my skin crawl. It was a clinical word, not something a loving husband should say about his wife's reaction to a healthy breakfast drink. It's just strong, I reiterated, taking a tiny, reluctant sip. The bitterness was overwhelming, with that same chemical, almost medicinal aftertaste. It was like drinking from a chlorinated pool lined with weeds. Could we maybe try a different recipe? Something with more fruit? Pineapple or oranges to sweeten it. His affable mask slipped for a second, revealing a flash of pure irritation. Fruit is just sugar, Danielle. Sugar feeds inflammation. The whole point of this is to alkalize your body, reduce inflammation, not add to it. This isn't a smoothie from Jamba Juice. It's a therapeutic regimen. He crossed his arms. I've put a lot of time and research into this. Don't you trust me? There it was again. The guilt trip, expertly delivered. Don't you trust me? How do you answer that without starting a war? Of course I trust you, I said, the lie tasting worse than the juice. I just think maybe my palate isn't as advanced as your research. It'll adapt, he said, his tone final. He turned back to the counter and started disassembling the blender with practiced efficiency, rinsing each part immediately. Drink up. I want to see that glass empty. I have a conference call in 10. He left the kitchen, and I was alone with the vile concoction. I stared at it, my heart pounding. Last night's interaction had shifted something. This wasn't just about health anymore. It was about control. And the way he cleaned that blender so thoroughly, so quickly, every single time, that wasn't just fastidiousness. That was a man who didn't want to be scrutinized. I waited until I heard his office door close down the hall. Then I moved. I didn't pour it down the kitchen sink. Instead, I grabbed the glass, hurried to the half bathroom under the stairs, and dumped it into the toilet. The green sludge swirled in the white bowl before disappearing with a flush. I felt a surge of petty victory, followed immediately by a deep sense of unease. I was sneaking around my own house, disposing of my husband's healthy breakfast like it was contraband. I washed the glass meticulously in the bathroom sink, drying it with a hand towel. I brought it back to the kitchen and placed it in the dishwasher, burying it under a plate and a coffee mug. Maybe that was overkill. But after his comment about the blender being clean, I wasn't taking any chances. My phone vibrated. A text from Sarah. Survival check. Did you drink the lawn clippings? I typed back, my fingers flying. Dumped it. He's watching me like a hawk. This is getting weird. Sarah. The 3 dots appeared immediately. Weird how? Weirder than usual. He's cleaning the blender like he's disposing of evidence. And he asked if I trusted him when I questioned the ingredients. Red flag. Huge. That's manipulative as hell. Danny, you need to find out what's in that crap. How? I texted back, feeling helpless. He won't tell me. Says it's a proprietary blend. Then do some detective work. Where does he keep the booster stuff? Find it. Read the label. I glanced down the hall towards his closed office door. The idea sent a jolt of fear through me. Snooping through Michael's things was a line I'd never crossed. He valued his privacy, his meticulously organized spaces. But Sarah was right. This had gone beyond a quirky health kick. Danielle? Michael's voice called from his office. Could you bring me a glass of water? I jumped, my heart leaping into my throat. Sure, I called back, my voice an octave too high. I poured him a glass of water, my hands trembling slightly. As I walked down the hall, I passed the door to the garage. An idea formed. The groceries. He usually brought the groceries in, unpacking them himself, putting everything away in its designated place. The health food stuff always went in a specific cupboard next to the protein powder. After his call ended, Michael emerged from his office. I'm heading to the gym, then straight to the site to meet the contractors. I'll be back by 6. Okay, I said, trying to sound normal. Have a good workout. He kissed my cheek. Don't forget, we have the community board meeting tonight. 7 sharp. Don't be late. I won't. The moment the garage door closed behind him, I sprang into action. I went straight to the high cupboard next to the fridge. It was packed with his supplements. Giant tubs of protein powder, creatine, BCAAs, all in neutral-colored containers with bold, serious fonts. I scanned the labels, my eyes darting over the names. Nothing that sounded like a booster blend. Then, tucked at the very back, behind a container of electrolyte powder, I saw a small, unmarked glass jar with a black lid. There was no label. My pulse quickened. I reached for it, but it was just out of reach. I dragged a chair over, my nerves screaming with every squeak of the chair legs on the floor. I grabbed the jar. It was heavy, about half full of a dark, fine powder. I unscrewed the lid. The smell that wafted out was unmistakable, the exact same bitter, chemical scent that dominated the juice. This was it, but there was no label, no ingredients, nothing. Just a mysterious powder in an unmarked jar. Why would a legitimate supplement have no label? A cold dread, deeper than any I'd felt before, settled in my bones. Sarah's joke about cyanide didn't seem so funny anymore. I heard the crunch of tires on the driveway. My blood ran cold. He wasn't supposed to be back for hours. I fumbled with the jar, nearly dropping it in my panic. I screwed the lid back on and shoved it into the very back of the cupboard, knocking over a tub of protein powder in the process. I scrambled to right it, my heart hammering against my ribs. The garage door began to hum open. I jumped off the chair, pushed it back to the table, and lunged for the sink, turning on the water just as the door from the garage opened. Michael walked in, holding his phone. He stopped when he saw me. "What are you doing?" "Just washing this glass," I said, holding up a clean glass that was already in the sink. My voice was shaky. "Forgot to put it in the dishwasher." He looked at me, his expression unreadable. His gaze swept over the kitchen, lingering for a split second on the chair I'd moved. Had he noticed it was out of place? "I forgot my blueprints," he said slowly, still watching me. "Left them on the dining table. I hadn't even seen them there." "Oh, right." He walked to the dining room, collected the roll of papers, and came back into the kitchen. He stood there for a moment, just looking at me. The sound of the running water was deafening. "You okay, Danny? You seem jumpy." "I'm fine," I said, turning off the faucet. The silence that followed was heavy, accusatory, just a headache, probably from missing my coffee. He nodded, but his eyes were still narrowed. "The juice should help with that. The nutrients will balance your energy. You did drink it, right?" The question hung in the air between us. A loaded trap. He knew, or he suspected. I saw it in his face. This was a test. Every last drop. I lied, looking him straight in the eye. He held my gaze for a long, terrifying moment. Then, he smiled. It was a thin, cold smile. "Good. I'm glad to hear it. See you tonight. Don't be late for the meeting." He turned and walked back to the garage. The door closed. I stood frozen at the sink, my knees weak. The unmarked jar felt like it was burning a hole in the back of the cupboard. I wasn't just suspicious anymore. I was scared, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to my core, that I needed to get a sample of that powder. The community board meeting was a special kind of torture. Seated in a folding chair in the Oakwood Estates clubhouse, surrounded by my neighbors, I felt like I was acting in a play where everyone knew their lines except me. Michael, of course, was in his element. He held court near the coffee urn, laughing loudly at Tom Henderson's jokes about property values and nodding seriously as Mrs. Gable complained about the Johnsons' unsightly garden gnome collection. He looked over at me and gave a warm, wifely smile. To anyone else, it was a doting glance. To me, it felt like a warning shot. "Behave. Perform. You're quiet tonight, Danielle," Lisa Milligan said, sliding into the chair beside me. She was one of the few people in the neighborhood I genuinely liked. Sharp, kind, and perceptive. "Everything okay? Just a long day," I said, forcing a smile, trying to get a new client project off the ground. "You know how it is. Tell me about it. I've been chasing a 2-year-old all day. I'd kill for a quiet day at a computer." She leaned closer, her voice dropping. "Though, between you and me, this is about as exciting as watching paint dry. I only come for the free cookies." I managed a weak laugh. My eyes kept drifting back to Michael. He was now deep in conversation with Bob Harris, the HOA president, probably pitching some idea for community beautification. He was so good at this, so convincing. Was I going crazy? Was Sarah's cynicism and my own latent anxiety twisting a husband's concern into something sinister? The meeting dragged on about drainage issues and the upcoming summer barbecue. I barely heard a word. All I could think about was the unmarked jar in the cupboard, the feeling of being caught, the cold calculation in Michael's eyes when he'd asked if I'd drunk the juice. Finally, it was over. We said our goodbyes, exchanging hollow pleasantries with the Harrisons and the Gables. The moment we were in the car, the atmosphere shifted. The easy, public-facing Michael vanished. The car interior felt like a sealed vault. He started the engine, but didn't pull out of the parking space. The silence was thick and heavy. "You embarrassed me in there, Danielle," he said, his voice low and even. I stared at him, stunned. "What are you talking about?" I didn't say a word. "Exactly. You sat there like a sullen child. Lisa Milligan had to come over and check on you. What was that about? It makes me look bad. Like I can't keep my own wife happy." The accusation was so unfair, so manipulative. It took my breath away. I was tired. "Michael, I had a headache." "Since when is being quiet a crime?" "It's not a crime. It's a choice. And your choices reflect on me." He finally put the car in reverse and backed out. "This is a community. Perception matters. My business depends on the relationships I build here. I need you to be part of that. I need you to try." I was trying. I shot back, my temper flaring. Maybe if I wasn't so preoccupied with the fact that my husband is secretly poisoning me every morning, I'd have more energy for small talk. The words hung in the air, reckless and dangerous. I'd said it, the P word. He didn't flinch. He didn't even look at me. He just drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. When he finally spoke, his voice was dangerously calm. "Poisoning you. That's what you think. After everything I do for you. The house, the cars, the life I provide, and you think I'm trying to poison you with a health drink? It doesn't taste like a health drink, Michael. It tastes like chemicals, and you hide the ingredients. You have an unmarked jar of powder in the cupboard. What am I supposed to think?" "So you were snooping." He said it as a statement of fact, not a question. I knew it. I saw the chair was moved. "I wasn't snooping. I was looking for aspirin, and I found a jar with no label. Forgive me for being curious about what you're putting in my body." He let out a short, harsh laugh. "It's a concentrated greens powder, Danielle, a prototype from a new company my supplement guy is working with. It's not FDA approved yet, which is why there's no label. It's expensive, and it's potent. That's why I'm careful with it. That's the secret ingredient." He glanced at me, his expression a mix of hurt and contempt. "I was going to surprise you when it hit the market. Tell you'd been taking the next big thing in wellness. But I guess you've already decided I'm a monster." The story was so smooth, so plausible. It played directly into his narrative of being the forward-thinking provider. And the worst part was, a large, desperate part of me wanted to believe it. It was so much easier than the alternative. "A prototype?" I repeated, my anger deflating into confusion. "Yes, but if you're so paranoid, we'll stop. Effective immediately. No more juice. You can go back to your coffee and your sugar. We'll see how your energy levels are in a month." He sounded resigned, disappointed. He had flipped the script perfectly. Now, I was the ungrateful, paranoid wife who had ruined his thoughtful surprise. "Michael, don't. Danielle, just don't." We spent the rest of the short drive home in a silence more profound than before. He'd won. He'd offered a logical explanation and framed my suspicion as a personal betrayal. By the time we pulled into the garage, I felt foolish and guilty. He went straight upstairs to shower without another word. I stood alone in the kitchen, my mind reeling. Was it a prototype? It made sense. It was exactly the kind of cutting-edge, biohacking thing Michael would be into. But then I remembered the look in his eyes when he'd caught me at the sink, the way he cleaned the blender, the intensity of his insistence, the unshakable, visceral knowledge in my gut that something was very, very wrong. I waited until I heard the shower running. Then I went to the garage cupboard. I moved the protein powder tubs with trembling hands. The unmarked jar was still there. I pulled it out. A prototype. It could be true. I needed proof. Not for him. For me. I unscrewed the lid. The smell wafted up. Bitter. Chemical. I looked around frantically for something, anything, to put a sample in. My eyes landed on a box of small, unused Ziploc bags in a drawer, the kind Michael used for portioning nuts. I grabbed one. With a steady hand I didn't know I possessed, I used the tiny scoop inside the jar to transfer a small amount of the fine, dark powder into the plastic bag. I sealed it tightly, the crinkle of the plastic sounding like a gunshot in the quiet kitchen. I shoved the tiny, incriminating bag into the pocket of my jeans. Then I carefully wiped the jar clean, placed it back in the exact spot I'd found it, and rearranged the other containers to hide it. My heart was pounding. I had just stolen a sample of a substance that my husband claimed was a health prototype, but my instinct screamed was something else entirely. I felt like a spy in my own home, a traitor to my marriage. But the weight of the baggie in my pocket felt like the first solid thing I'd held onto in weeks. The next morning, the kitchen was silent. No blender. Michael was already dressed, sipping a black coffee at the island. He looked up as I entered. "I've got an early meeting," he said, his tone neutral, distant. "There's coffee made." "Thanks," I said quietly. "I trust you'll be able to find a breakfast that meets with your approval." He added, a sharp edge of sarcasm in his voice. The war was cold now. The juice ritual was over, but the battle lines had been drawn. And in my pocket, tucked away in my dresser drawer, was a tiny bag of powder that held the truth. I just needed the courage to find out what it was. The Cold War in the kitchen stretched into a week. The silence each morning was a vast improvement over the blender's roar, but it was heavy with resentment. Michael was polite, distant, and perpetually disappointed. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. The tiny Ziploc bag of powder was a lead weight in my jewelry box, a secret that pulsed with menace. I knew I had to get it tested, but the how was a terrifying problem. I couldn't just walk into a lab. What would I say? My salvation came in the form of Jake, Michael's 20-year-old brother. He bounded into our house on Saturday afternoon like a golden retriever, all lanky limbs and easy smiles, a stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere Michael and I had cultivated. "Danny," he yelled, throwing the front door open without knocking. "I smell cookies. Please tell me you baked." I managed a genuine smile for the first time in days. "Oatmeal chocolate chip. They're cooling. Help yourself." Jake was a breath of fresh air, a college student with a bottomless stomach and a cheerful disregard for Michael's rigid rules. He was the one person who could puncture my husband's stern facade. Michael emerged from his study, frowning at the disruption. "Jake, a little warning would be nice. Where's the fun in that?" Jake said, his mouth already full of a cookie. "Man, these are good. Way better than the protein bars you're always pushing on me." Michael's jaw tightened. "Those bars are nutritionally balanced. Those," he said, pointing a disdainful finger at the cookie in Jake's hand, "are pure sugar. You'll crash in an hour. Worth it." Jake mumbled, grabbing another. He looked at me. "You look tired. Danny, Mike working you too hard?" The question was innocent, but it hung in the air. Michael's eyes flicked to me, a silent warning. "Just busy with work." I said quickly, "How's school?" Jake launched into a dramatic retelling of a biology professor he was convinced was trying to fail the entire class. As he talked, an idea began to form in my mind, wild and dangerous. The juice was gone, but the powder remained. I needed to know what it was. And Jake was perfect. He was always hungry, always thirsty, and he trusted his big brother implicitly. Later, as Jake was getting ready to leave, I saw my chance. Michael had taken a phone call in his office. "Hey, Jake," I said, casually walking him to the door. "You want to take some for the road?" I held up a plastic container with a few cookies. "Are you kidding? You're a lifesaver." He took the container. "You know," I said, lowering my voice conspiratorially, "I feel bad about the whole juice thing with Michael. He put a lot of effort into that." Jake shrugged. "Yeah, he was kind of obsessed. but it was gross, right? You're not missing much. I know, but he had this special blend he was using. Really high-end, expensive stuff. It's just sitting in the cupboard now. Seems like such a waste. I paused, watching his face. It's supposed to be packed with energy-boosting nutrients. Perfect for pulling all-nighters. Way better than Red Bull. Jake's interest was piqued. Yeah, what kind of nutrients? I don't know. The super secret, proprietary kind. I said, rolling my eyes playfully. You know, Michael, but it's just going to go to waste. If you ever want a healthy pick-me-up, you're welcome to it. Just don't tell Michael. He'd be pissed I'm giving away his precious supplements. I held my breath. This was the crucial part. I was offering him the one thing I feared. I was gambling with his health to save my own sanity. The guilt was immediate and nauseating. Jake, however, grinned. A secret health stash? I love it. Yeah, sure. Hook me up. My midterms are killing me. I could use an edge. My heart hammered against my ribs. Great. Next time you're over, I'll sneak you a little. You can just mix a scoop into a smoothie or something. You're the best. Danny. He gave me a one-armed hug and bounded out the door. Cookies in hand, I closed the door and leaned against it. My legs weak. I had just done it. I had made Jake my unwitting test subject. The plan was monstrous, but it was the only one I had. If the powder was harmless, no harm done. Jake would get a vitamin boost, and I'd be the crazy, paranoid wife who needed to apologize to her husband. But if it wasn't, a few days later, Jake was back, complaining about a paper he had to write. Michael was at the office. It was the perfect opportunity. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual. You want to try that booster blend now? For your paper? Sure. Why not? Jake said, slumping onto a stool at the kitchen island. I need all the help I can get. My hands were slick with sweat as I opened the dreaded jar. The familiar, acrid smell hit me. Jake wrinkled his nose. Whoa, that smells healthy. It's strong. I agreed, my voice trembling slightly. I scooped a small amount, much less than Michael used to use, into a glass of orange juice I'd already poured. I stirred it vigorously, the powder turning the bright orange liquid a murky brown-green. Here, bottoms up. Jake took the glass, hesitated for a second, then shrugged. For science. He chugged it down in a few large gulps. He grimaced and shuddered violently. Ugh, that is brutal. Tastes like dirt and pennies. I know, I said, a wave of relief washing over me that he'd drunk it. The deed was done. But you'll thank me when you're acing your paper at 3 a.m. Yeah, we'll see, he said, grabbing a cookie to get the taste out of his mouth. He hung around for a bit, playing on his phone, and then left to go study. The moment he was gone, the anxiety came crashing down. What had I done? I spent the rest of the day in a state of high alert, jumping every time my phone buzzed, expecting a call from Jake saying he was sick, or worse, from a hospital. But the call never came. Later that night, Jake texted me, Danny, that stuff is no joke. I just powered through my entire paper, and I'm not even tired. Mike wasn't kidding about the energy boost. Got any more? I stared at the text, a cold dread seeping into my bones. Energy boost. It was working. But on what? Caffeine? Amphetamines? Or something else entirely? My plan had backfired spectacularly. Instead of proving it was dangerous, I'd just created a happy customer. And worse, I'd given Michael exactly what he wanted, a willing participant. The following week, Jake started showing up more frequently, always when Michael wasn't home. His visits had a new purpose. Hey, Danny, you got any more of that magic powder? He'd ask, his eyes a little too bright. I've got a huge exam to cram for. I became his dealer. Each time, I'd give him a little, my guilt and fear growing with every scoop. I tried to monitor him. He did seem more energetic, almost jittery, but he was a college kid. Sleep deprivation and caffeine were the norm. One afternoon, He came over looking pale and rubbing his temples. You okay? I asked, my stomach clenching. Yeah, just a headache, probably from staring at a screen for 12 hours straight. He managed a weak smile. That stuff gives you a killer crash. Though, I was up all night, and then this morning, boom, wall. Maybe cut my next dose with a little less conviction. A crash, a headache. These were side effects. Real ones. It was something. But was it enough? I needed more. I needed proof that would hold up. Not just a college kid's complaints about a headache. The situation was spiraling. I had wanted to test the powder, and now I had a dependent. Michael's words echoed in my head. Let me take care of you. He was taking care of me. All right. He had me so twisted up and scared that I was now poisoning his brother just to find a way out. The irony was so dark, it was almost laughable. I was trapped in a nightmare of my own making, and the exit sign was getting further away with every passing day. The next 2 weeks were a special kind of hell. My life became a twisted routine of managing 2 men. A husband I was secretly investigating and a brother-in-law I was covertly dosing with an unknown substance. Jake's visits were now a near-daily occurrence. The magic powder had become his essential study aid, and I, his reluctant supplier, each time he came over. I scrutinized him like a lab rat. The initial energy boost he'd reported seemed to be morphing into something else. He was jumpier, his hands often shaking slightly as he took the glass of juice I'd spiked. The bright, easygoing college kid was being sanded down, replaced by someone edgy and irritable. Man, I can't sleep for crap anymore, he complained one Tuesday, slumped at the kitchen island. Dark circles hung under his eyes. My brain just won't shut off. It's like static. Maybe you should lay off the booster for a few days. Jake, I suggested, my voice carefully neutral. Get some real rest. He shook his head, a frantic little motion. No way. I've got my economics midterm tomorrow. I need the edge. Just maybe a half scoop today. The crash yesterday was brutal. My heart ached. I was doling out his dosage now. A pharmacist of poison. Jake, are you sure this is a good idea? You don't look so good. I'm fine, he snapped, uncharacteristically sharp. Then he seemed to catch himself, offering a tired version of his usual grin. Sorry, Danny, just stressed. The powder helps me focus. Really? He drank the half scoop I gave him, grimacing as usual. As he left, he seemed calmer, the jitters subsiding. It was the most terrifying part. The substance wasn't just harming him. It was creating a dependency. It was solving the problem it was causing. My relationship with Michael was a frozen tundra. The prototype story hung between us, an unaddressed lie we both pretended to believe. He was icily polite, the model of a wounded husband. He'd started making a show of drinking a green smoothie himself every morning, a silent rebuke of my rejection. Another big project for Jake? He asked one evening, watching me clean a glass that had held Jake's latest dose. His tone was casual, but his eyes were sharp. He's got midterms. I said, not meeting his gaze. He's here more than he's at his own apartment. I hope you're not just feeding him junk. He needs to keep his focus. There was a weird emphasis on the word focus. I'm just giving him a snack. Michael, he's a growing boy. The lie tasted like ash. I know what he's like, easily distracted. Michael walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. It felt like a lead weight. It's good that you're looking out for him. But remember, I know what's best for this family. You should trust that. The threat was veiled, but it was there. I know what's best. You should trust me. The subtext was clear. Stop interfering. The breaking point came the day before the community barbecue. Jake showed up at the door, looking ghastly. He was pale, sweating, and his pupils were dilated. He stumbled past me into the living room and collapsed onto the sofa. Jake, what's wrong? I knelt beside him, my panic immediate and all-consuming. Don't know, he mumbled, clutching his head. Bad. Really bad. My head is splitting. And the dreams. God, the dreams are so weird. Like waking nightmares. This was beyond a headache. This was a crisis. I'm taking you to the hospital. No, he said, with surprising force. No hospital. It's just stress. I just need to close my eyes for a minute. He curled into a fetal position on the couch, shivering. Maybe a little of the powder would help. Level me out. He was asking for more of the very thing that was making him sick. In that moment, any last shred of doubt vanished. This wasn't a vitamin. This was a drug, and I had been administering it to him. Jake, listen to me, I said, my voice low and urgent. That powder, I think it might be making you sick. He just groaned in response, lost in his own misery. I stood up, my mind racing. I had to end this. Now, I had the sample in my jewelry box. I would find a lab, today, and pay whatever it cost to get it analyzed. I didn't care about the consequences anymore. I went to the kitchen to get him a glass of water. As I turned back, I saw Michael standing in the doorway to the living room. He was watching Jake, and on his face wasn't concern or alarm. It was a cold, clinical assessment, like a mechanic looking at a malfunctioning engine. Then his eyes shifted to me, and the expression vanished, replaced by a mask of brotherly worry. What happened? He asked, his voice full of forced concern as he walked over to the couch. Jake? Buddy, you okay? Headache. Jake moaned, probably dehydrated. Michael said, smoothly, shooting me a look that was pure accusation. What have you been letting him eat and drink while he's been over here? Danielle? A lot of sugar? He's sensitive to that. I was too stunned to speak. He was doing it again, twisting it, making it my fault. He needs a doctor. Michael. I insisted. He needs to drink water and stop pulling all-nighters. Michael said firmly. He bent down and shook Jake's shoulder. Come on, up you get. You're not dying. You're going to go home. Drink a gallon of water and sleep it off. The community barbecue is tomorrow. You can't miss that. He maneuvered a protesting, semi-conscious Jake to his feet and began guiding him toward the door. He was disposing of the problem, quickly and efficiently. I'll drive him, Michael said, his tone brooking no argument. You stay here. I watched from the doorway as he half-carried Jake to his car. Before he got in the driver's seat, he looked back at me. The distance between us was too far to see his expression clearly, but I could feel it. It wasn't anger. It was something colder, something like calculation. He had seen what the powder could do, and his first instinct hadn't been panic. It had been containment. I backed into the house, my whole body trembling. The community barbecue was tomorrow, a huge neighborhood event. Everyone would be there, and Michael expected Jake to be there, to be fine. He expected everything to be normal, but nothing was normal. I had a bag of poison in my dresser and a brother-in-law who was crashing on the rocks because of it. The carefully constructed walls of my life were cracking, and the terrible truth was beginning to seep through. The barbecue wasn't just a social event anymore. It felt like a deadline. The day of the Oakwood Estates' annual summer barbecue dawned bright and obscenely cheerful. Sunlight streamed into the bedroom, a stark contrast to the cold dread that had taken up permanent residence in my gut. I'd barely slept, my mind racing with images of Jake's pale, sweating face and Michael's chillingly calm reaction. Michael, however, was the picture of relaxed anticipation. He hummed in the shower, something he never did. When he emerged, he was already dressed in crisp khaki shorts and a polo shirt, the uniform of a suburban patriarch ready to mingle. Big day, he said, smiling at me. It was the first genuine-looking smile he'd given me in weeks, and it was more terrifying than his cold silence. It was the smile of a man who believed everything was going according to plan. The forecast is perfect. Should be a great turnout. I sat up in bed, clutching the sheets. Michael, About Jake, are you sure he's okay? He looked really bad yesterday. The smile didn't falter, but it tightened at the edges. Jake is fine. I spoke to him this morning. He said he slept for 12 hours straight and feels great. Just a bad migraine. You know how dramatic he can be. He walked over to the closet and started pulling out an outfit for me. A breezy sundress. Wear this. The blue brings out your eyes. The gesture, which might have seemed loving to an outsider, felt like he was dressing a mannequin. I was part of the display, another element of the perfect life he was curating for public consumption. He wasn't being dramatic. Michael, he was ill. He turned to me, the smile finally vanishing. Danielle, drop it. It was a migraine. End of story. Today is about the community, about us presenting a united front. I will not have you sowing drama with wild theories because you're feeling guilty. Guilty? What do I have to feel guilty about? The question flew out of my mouth, loaded with a meaning only I understood. His eyes narrowed. For encouraging his bad habits. For feeding him junk when he's here. Now, get ready. We need to be there early to help Bob set up. He left the room, leaving me trembling with a mixture of fear and fury. He knew he had to know I was giving Jake the powder. His comment about bad habits was too specific, and he was covering for it. Why? To protect me? That was impossible. To protect himself. An hour later, we walked across the perfectly manicured lawn of the community park. The air was thick with the smell of charcoal and sunscreen. Red and white checkered tablecloths fluttered in the breeze. It was a scene of idyllic American suburbia, and I felt like an imposter walking into a trap. Bob Harris, a large, jovial man with a perpetual grin, clapped Michael on the back. Mike, good to see you. Thanks for coming early. Lisa's got the salads set up over there. Think you can man the grill with me later? Wouldn't miss it. Bob, Michael said, his voice booming with false bonhomie. He seamlessly integrated into the crowd, shaking hands, laughing. He was in his element. I hovered near the drink table, a useless bundle of nerves. Sarah found me almost immediately. You look like you're about to bolt, she murmured, handing me a plastic cup of lemonade. What's going on? You've been ghosting my texts for 2 days. I pulled her away from the crowd, behind a large oak tree that offered a sliver of privacy. The words tumbled out in a hushed, frantic whisper. I told her everything, about finding the unmarked jar, about Michael's prototype story, about my terrible, desperate plan to give the powder to Jake, about his deteriorating health and Michael's reaction the day before. Her face went from concerned to horrified. Danny, my God, you have to call the police, or poison control, something. And say what? I hissed. I think my husband is poisoning me. So I started poisoning his brother instead? I have no proof. The powder is just powder. Jake's symptoms could be from stress. Michael has an explanation for everything. I'd sound insane. They'd probably arrest me. Then we need to get Jake to a doctor, now, and tell them what he's ingested. Sarah insisted, her voice firm. We have to get that sample tested. I will. I promise. After today. I just need to get through this. My words died in my throat. Jake had just arrived. He was walking across the grass, and a few people waved. He looked better. Not great, but functional. He was wearing sunglasses, but he was upright, and he even managed a weak wave back to someone. My heart lurched. Maybe Michael was right. Maybe it was just a migraine. Maybe I was insane. Then Jake got closer, and I saw the details. His hands were shoved deep in his pockets, but I could see a slight tremor in his arm. His skin was waxy. He moved with a stiff, careful gait, as if his head was too heavy for his neck. Michael spotted him and strode over, throwing a comradely arm around his brother's shoulders. I was too far away to hear the words, but I saw the performance. Michael was laughing, squeezing Jake's shoulder, the picture of a doting big brother. Jake nodded, his responses seeming slow, delayed. He doesn't look okay, Sarah whispered, her hand on my arm. He looks doped up. That was it. That was the word. He didn't look sick, he looked sedated, or like he was coming down off something. The barbecue proceeded with agonizing slowness. People ate hamburgers and hot dogs. Kids screamed with laughter, chasing each other with water guns. Lisa Milligan tried to engage me in conversation about a new neighborhood book club, and I responded with monosyllabic answers, my eyes constantly scanning for Jake. He was sticking close to Michael, who was guiding him through the crowd like a handler. Michael would hand him a plate of food Jake didn't eat, a soda he barely sipped. It was a controlled, terrifying ballet. The climax of the event was always Bob Harris's speech. He climbed onto a small wooden platform near the grill, tapping a spoon against a microphone that let out a screech of feedback. Hello? Hello? Testing. Okay, folks, if I can have your attention. He boomed. The crowd gradually quieted. Turning towards him, Michael stood near the front, one hand firmly on Jake's back, steering him to a spot beside him. I stood at the periphery, Sarah's solid, worried presence next to me. Another fantastic year for Oakwood Estates. Bob began, listing off community achievements, the new playground equipment, the successful block party. It was mind-numbingly boring, but everyone smiled and nodded. I wasn't listening to Bob. I was watching Jake. Under the bright afternoon sun, I saw a bead of sweat roll down his temple from under his baseball cap. He shifted his weight from foot to foot, a restless, jerky movement. Michael leaned over and said something to him, his voice a low murmur. Jake flinched, and we have to thank the social committee, especially Lisa Milligan, for organizing this wonderful day, Bob said, gesturing to Lisa, who waved. A smattering of applause rippled through the crowd. It was a normal, polite sound, but to Jake, it seemed to be a trigger. As the applause died down, I saw his whole body go rigid. His hands, which had been in his pockets, flew up to his head, his fingers tangling in his hair. He started to shake his head, slowly at first, then more violently. No, he moaned. It was low, but audible in the sudden quiet. Michael grabbed his arm, his grip vice-like. Jake, he hissed, his smile strained. Pull it together. But it was too late. Jake's head snapped up. He ripped off his sunglasses, and even from a distance, I could see his eyes were wide, unfocused, blazing with a terror that wasn't connected to anything in the sunny park. Get out of my head, he screamed. The words weren't just loud, they were a raw, Solaire screech that cut through the air and silenced the last of the chatter. Stop the voices! Make it stop! He clawed at his own ears, his screams escalating into wordless, primal cries of agony. He stumbled back, crashing into the dessert table. A tower of cupcakes wobbled and then collapsed, splattering frosting and cake across the grass. For a full 3 seconds, there was absolute, dead silence. The entire community of Oakwood Estates, over 100 people, stood frozen, staring at the young man having a public psychotic break in the middle of their family barbecue. Then, chaos erupted. Someone screamed. Kids started crying. People surged forward, then back, unsure whether to help or flee. And in the center of it all, Michael stood utterly motionless. His face was a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. But it wasn't the shock of a concerned brother. It was the shock of a man watching a meticulously laid plan explode in a spectacular, unpredictable fireball. He was Cheyenne-Lu, stunned, dumbfounded, his entire world crashing down in that single, screaming moment. His eyes met mine across the chaos, and in that brief, electric second, I saw past the shock. I saw the truth. This wasn't part of the plan. Jake wasn't supposed to break. Not here. Not like this. The carefully constructed facade of the perfect husband, the provider, the caring brother, shattered into a million pieces. And the man left standing there was a stranger I had every reason to fear. Time seemed to warp. The silence after Jake's scream was brief but absolute. A vacuum of sound that was instantly filled by a cacophony of gasps, cries, and panicked shouts. I stood frozen, my feet rooted to the grass, my gaze locked with Michael's. In his eyes, the initial shock was already being burned away by a hotter, more dangerous emotion, rage, a pure, incandescent fury that was directed squarely at me. It was broken by Bob Harris's voice, blaring through the microphone, now thick with alarm. Everybody back up. Give him some air. Somebody call 911. The spell was broken. I lunged forward, pushing past a stunned Lisa Milligan, my focus solely on Jake. He was on the ground now, curled into a tight ball, rocking back and forth. His hands clamped over his ears as he sobbed and muttered incoherently. The remains of a cupcake were smeared across his shirt. "Jake!" I cried, dropping to my knees beside him. I reached for his shoulder, but he flinched violently away from my touch. "Don't! There in the light. Can't you see them?" He shrieked, his eyes wide with a terror that was heartbreaking to witness. Michael reached us a second later. He didn't go to Jake. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep with brutal force. "What did you do?" He snarled, his voice a low, venomous whisper meant only for me. The friendly neighbor facade was gone, completely stripped away. "What did Ito?" I shot back, trying to wrench my arm free. "He's sick. Michael, he needs help. I told you to stay out of it," he hissed, his face inches from mine. "I had it under control until you started meddling." This admission, in the midst of the chaos, was as good as a confession. I had it under control. Control over what? His brother's health? "Sir, you need to step back," a firm voice said. Tom Henderson, a retired paramedic who lived 2 streets over, was suddenly there, gently but firmly pushing Michael away from me and Jake. Tom's wife was already on the phone, speaking rapidly to a 911 operator. The community was closing ranks, but not around Michael. Around the crisis, Michael released my arm, taking a step back. He smoothed his polo shirt, a desperate attempt to regain composure. The mask was back, but it was cracked, and everyone could see the ugliness beneath. He has a history of anxiety attacks," Michael announced to the crowd, his voice shaking with the effort to sound calm and authoritative. This is just a severe episode. He just needs to calm down. This is an anxiety." "Michael," Tom said grimly, his experienced eyes assessing Jake's twitching, hallucinating form. "This looks neurological or chemical." Tom's gaze flicked from Jake to me, and then to Michael, and it was clear he'd heard Michael's hissed accusation. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing rapidly louder. The sound seemed to agitate Jake even more. He started thrashing, and it took Tom and another man to hold him still. Sarah materialized at my side, putting a steadying hand on my back. "I've got you," she whispered. The next few minutes were a blur of flashing red and blue lights. Paramedics swarmed Jake, their movements efficient and calm. They asked Michael questions about Jake's medical history, medications, and any drug allergies. "He's perfectly healthy," Michael insisted, his voice too loud. "No medications, just stress from school." One of the paramedics, a woman with a kind, no-nonsense face, looked up from where she was trying to get a blood pressure cuff on Jake's thrashing arm. "Sir, has he taken any substances? Any drugs? It's critical we know." "No, of course not," Michael said, the picture of offended propriety. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. This was the moment. I could stay silent, let them take Jake away, and let Michael continue this lie, or I could speak the terrible, damning truth. I looked at Jake, his face contorted in a private hell I had helped create. I thought of the unmarked jar. I thought of Michael's cold calculation. I stepped forward. "He's been taking a supplement," I said, my voice trembling but clear. "A powder. My husband has it. An unmarked jar. The air went still. The paramedics looked at me, then at Michael. The small circle of neighbors who were close enough to hear, Bob, Lisa, Tom stared, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning understanding. Michael's face turned a terrifying shade of purple. Danielle, for God's sake, this is not the time for your hysterical theories. He roared. You're embarrassing yourself. What kind of powder, ma'am? The female paramedic asked, ignoring Michael completely. I don't know, I admitted, tears finally springing to my eyes. Tears of fear and relief. It's unlabeled. My husband has been giving it to me for weeks. I didn't like the taste, so I started giving it to Jake. The admission made me sound monstrous, and I saw the judgment in some of the neighbors' eyes. I didn't care. It made me feel sick, and it's been making him sick. Worse and worse. She's lying, Michael shouted, but the conviction was gone. He sounded desperate, cornered. She's been under a lot of stress. She's not well. Sir, we need to take your brother to County General, the lead paramedic said, his tone leaving no room for argument. We can discuss this at the hospital. They were loading Jake, now sedated, onto a gurney. I'm going with him, I said, my voice firm. Like hell you are, Michael snarled, grabbing my arm again. Tom Henderson stepped between us, his bulk suddenly imposing. I think Danielle should go. Mike, you can follow in your car. It might be best for everyone to cool down a bit. The message was clear. The neighborhood had chosen a side, and it wasn't his. I didn't wait for Michael's response. I pulled free of his slackened grip and climbed into the back of the ambulance beside Jake's still form. As the doors swung shut, I caught one last glimpse of the barbecue, the colorful tablecloths, the half-eaten food, the stunned faces of my neighbors. And in the center of it all, Michael stood alone, isolated, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He wasn't looking at the ambulance, carrying his brother. He was staring at me, and the promise of vengeance in his eyes was more terrifying than any scream. The ambulance pulled away, the siren splitting the air. The perfect, sunny world of Oakwood Estates disappeared behind us, and I was left holding Jake's limp hand, racing toward a hospital and a truth I was no longer sure I was ready to face. The battle was out in the open now. The war had just begun. The ambulance ride was a surreal, jolting nightmare. The siren was a constant, screaming backdrop to the paramedics' comm. Professional chatter into the radio. Male, early 20s, presenting with acute psychotic episode. Possible toxic ingestion. BP elevated. Heart rate tachycardic. Each clinical term was a hammer blow. Toxic ingestion. I held Jake's hand, his skin cold and clammy. He was sedated but restless, his eyelids fluttering, low moans escaping his lips. The paramedic, a young guy named Chad, gave me a sympathetic look. He your brother? Brother-in-law. I whispered, my throat tight. He'll be okay. The docs at County are great. They'll figure it out. He paused. That stuff you mentioned, the powder. You have any of it? It would really help if they knew what they're dealing with. The tiny, damning Ziploc bag felt like it was burning a hole in the pocket of the sundress Michael had picked out. I had, in a moment of panicked clarity, grabbed it from my jewelry box as I ran from the house after the ambulance. It was my only card to play. I might, I said evasively. I didn't trust anyone yet. We arrived at County General in a whirlwind of activity. Jake was whisked away through double doors into the ER, and I was left standing in the chaotic waiting room, feeling lost and exposed. The smell of antiseptic and despair was overwhelming. I found a plastic chair in a corner, my mind racing. What was I supposed to do? Call Jake's parents? They lived in Florida and were notoriously hands-off. I was the one here. I was the one responsible. I didn't have to wait long for the next storm to hit. Michael burst through the automatic doors about 20 minutes later, his face a thundercloud. He scanned the room, his gaze locking onto me with predatory focus. He strode over, ignoring the stares of other people in the waiting room. "Where is he?" he demanded, his voice low and shaking with fury. "They took him back. They're working on him," I said, standing up to meet his anger. I wouldn't be cowed by him. "Not here." "What the hell did you tell them, Danielle?" He seethed, stepping into my personal space. "Did you fill their heads with your paranoid poison?" I told them the truth, that he's been taking an unlabeled substance that you provided. "That's not paranoia, Michael. That's a fact. Look at him." I gestured wildly toward the treatment areas. "I provided it to you." He shot back, the words exploding from him. "For your health, not for you to go behind my back and pump it into my brother like he was some kind of lab rat. This is on you. All of this is on you." It was the closest he'd come to a full confession. The admission hung in the air between us. He had given the powder to me. He wasn't denying its existence anymore. "Why, Michael?" My voice broke. "Why were you giving it to me? What is it?" His eyes glittered with a hard, cold light. "To help you. But you were too stubborn, too suspicious to see that. You had to undermine me. You had to play your little games. And now Jake is paying the price." A nurse approached us, her expression stern. "Sir, ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voices. This is a hospital. Are you family of the patient?" "I'm his brother," Michael said, instantly switching to a calm, reasonable tone. It was a breathtaking display of duplicity. "This is my wife. We're just very worried. The doctors are with him now. As soon as we have an update, someone will be out. In the meantime, I need one of you to come with me to registration. We need to get his information." "I'll do it," I said quickly, not trusting Michael to tell the truth about anything. Michael's jaw tightened, but he nodded at the nurse. "Of course." I followed the nurse to a desk, leaving Michael fuming in the waiting area. As I mechanically recited Jake's full name, date of birth, and address, my mind was elsewhere. Michael's anger felt off. It wasn't just anger about Jake. It was the rage of a man whose plan had been ruined, a plan that involved me. After providing the information, I was heading back to the waiting room when a doctor in blue scrubs emerged through the double doors. "Family of Jacob Reynolds?" Michael and I both stood up. "I'm his brother," Michael said, stepping forward. "I'm Dr. Evans. Your brother is stabilized. We've sedated him more heavily. His symptoms are consistent with a significant toxic reaction, likely to a stimulant or a hallucinogenic substance. We're running a full toxicology screen, but that takes time. Is there any chance you know what he might have taken? It would be incredibly helpful." This was it, my moment of truth. I saw Michael open his mouth, ready with another lie, another deflection. "Yes," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small, clear Ziploc bag. I held it out to the doctor. He's been ingesting this powder for the last couple of weeks. My husband has a jar of it at our house." Dr. Evans took the bag, holding it up to the light. He looked from the mysterious, dark powder to me, then to Michael, whose face had gone ashen. "And do you know what this is?" the doctor asked, his tone grave. "No," I said, my eyes locked on Michael. "It's unlabeled. My husband claimed it was a health supplement, a prototype." Dr. Evans's expression was skeptical. "I've seen a lot of supplements. They don't usually cause reactions like this. We'll send this to the lab for an expedited analysis. Thank you, Mrs. Reynolds." Danielle Reynolds. Michael stood utterly still, a statue of silent fury. The evidence was no longer just my word. It was a physical thing, now in the hands of medical professionals. I had just handed them the key. Dr. Evans nodded. "We'll be in touch as soon as we know more." He turned and disappeared back through the doors. The second he was gone, Michael turned to me. The controlled anger was gone, replaced by something raw and vicious. "You stupid bitch," he whispered, the words dripping with a hatred so pure it stole the air from my lungs. Do you have any idea what you've done? I've started to clean up the mess you made. I shot back, though I was trembling. What were you doing? Michael? What was in that powder? He leaned in so close I could feel his breath on my face. It was a business opportunity, a very lucrative one, and you've just ruined it. You've ruined everything. A business opportunity. The words hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't about my health. It had never been about my health. It was about money. He was using me as a test subject. Before I could respond, a new voice interrupted us. Michael Reynolds. We both turned. Two men stood there. They weren't doctors. They wore plain clothes, but their posture screamed authority. One of them flipped open a leather wallet, revealing a badge. I'm Detective Miller. This is Detective Vance. We'd like to ask you both a few questions about what happened today at Oakwood Estates. My knees went weak. The police. Of course. Someone had called the police. The public breakdown. The possible poisoning. It was a criminal matter now. Michael's face underwent another lightning-fast transformation. The venom was replaced by a mask of weary concern. Of course. Detectives. It's been a terrible day. My brother, he's very ill. He ran a hand through his hair. The picture of a distraught family man. We'll help in any way we can. But as he said it, his eyes flicked to me, and in that glance was a clear, unspoken threat. Watch what you say. The game had just changed again. We were no longer in a hospital. We were at a crime scene. And I was no longer just a wife confronting her husband. I was a witness, standing opposite a suspect. The walls were closing in, and the only way out was to tell the whole ugly truth. But would anyone believe the wife who had willingly fed the poison to the victim? The waiting room, already a pressure cooker of tension, seemed to shrink with the detective's presence. Detective Miller, the one who had spoken, was tall and lean with a calm, observant gaze. Detective Vance was broader, quieter, his eyes taking in every detail. From Michael's forced composure to my trembling hands. We can speak here, or we can find a more private room at the station, Miller said, his tone leaving no doubt which option he preferred. Here is fine, Michael said, quickly, too quickly. We want to be close if there's news about Jake. It was the right thing to say, the caring, brotherly thing. I saw a flicker of something in Detective Miller's eyes, not suspicion, but a note of assessment. Actually, I interjected, my voice stronger than I felt. I think a private room is a good idea. I couldn't do this with Michael glowering next to me, silently dictating my answers. Michael shot me a look that could curdle milk. Danielle, there's no need to inconvenience these officers. We can answer their questions right here. It's no inconvenience. Mr. Reynolds. Detective Vance spoke for the first time, his voice a low rumble. The hospital has a family conference room we can use. We can speak to you and your wife separately. It's standard procedure. The phrase standard procedure seemed to unsettle Michael more than anything else. This was now official. This was a real investigation. Separately? Why would we need to be separated? Michael asked, a brittle edge to his charm. Just saves time, Miller said, smoothly, already gesturing for us to follow. We'll talk to you first. Mr. Reynolds, Mrs. Reynolds, if you'd like to wait here, Detective Vance will stay with you. And just like that, they split us up. It was a tactical move, and I felt a surge of gratitude toward these two strangers. They knew what they were doing. Michael was led down a hallway, throwing one last, warning glance over his shoulder at me. Detective Vance guided me to a quiet corner of the waiting room, away from the other families. Can I get you some water, Mrs. Reynolds? Vance asked. He had a kind, tired face. No, thank you. I wrapped my arms around myself. Is Jake, will what I told the doctor help? It's a significant piece of evidence, he said non-committally. The lab will work fast. In the meantime, I need to understand what happened today, in your own words. And so, I told him. I started from the beginning. with the first glass of bitter juice. I left nothing out. I told him about my growing suspicion, the unmarked jar, Michael's prototype story, my guilt over involving Jake, and the terrifying progression of his symptoms. I told him about the public confrontation at the barbecue and Michael's hissed accusation. I had it under control. I was brutally honest about my own role. My terrible decision to use Jake as a test subject. I knew it made me look complicit, maybe even criminally negligent, but I had to risk it. The truth was my only currency. Vance listened patiently, taking occasional notes on a small pad. He didn't react, didn't judge. When I finished, emotionally drained, he simply asked, "And you believe your husband was intentionally administering a harmful substance to you?" "Yes," I whispered, the word feeling both terrifying and liberating. "I don't know why. He said something to me just before you arrived. He said it was a lucrative business opportunity." Vance's pen stilled. He looked up at me, his eyes sharp. "He said that? Those exact words?" I nodded. "He said I'd ruined it." Detective Vance made a note, underlining something. "Mrs. Reynolds, do you feel safe returning home with your husband tonight?" The question was so direct, so practical. It stunned me. Safe? The thought of being alone in that house with Michael, after what I'd just done, made my blood run cold. "No," I said, the word a choked sob. "No, I don't." He gave a curt nod. "Okay, we're going to help you with that." Meanwhile, in the sterile, windowless conference room, the dynamic was very different. "My wife is very emotional," Michael was saying, leaning back in his chair as if he were in his own office. He had adopted a tone of condescending concern. "She's been under a tremendous amount of pressure. Her work has been slow. She's been feeling unwell. She's concocted this entire fantasy because she feels guilty about what happened to Jake." Detective Miller listened, his expression neutral. "And what had happened to Jake? In your opinion?" "My brother is a college student. He experiments. I think he took something he shouldn't have, a street drug. Maybe, and my wife, in her fragile state, has latched onto this idea about my health supplements to avoid facing that reality, or to shift the blame." He sighed, the put-upon family man. "The powder she gave you is a perfectly legal, if potent, green supplement. I have the documentation at home. I'd be happy to provide it." "An unlabeled jar?" Miller asked mildly. "A sample from a startup company. As I said, I have the paperwork." Michael's story was smooth, rehearsed. He was trying to anticipate every angle. My wife's actions, giving it to Jake without my knowledge, were irresponsible, but she's not a chemist. She saw a reaction and panicked. "I'm not angry with her. I'm worried about her. She mentioned you were giving this supplement to her." Miller pressed, "As part of a new wellness regimen." She agreed to it, but she's inconsistent. She has a sweet tooth. When she didn't feel immediate results, she decided it was poison. He spread his hands, a gesture of helpless reason. "It's absurd. Why would I ever want to harm my wife? I love her. I've built a life with her. She said you told her it was a lucrative business opportunity." Miller said, his voice flat. For the first time, Michael's composure cracked. A muscle in his jaw twitched. He recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. "That's what I mean. She's twisting my words. I invest in health and wellness startups. I told her if this product was successful, it could be an opportunity. In her mind, that becomes me poisoning her for profit? It's insane." Detective Miller just looked at him, saying nothing. The silence stretched, becoming heavy, uncomfortable. Michael shifted in his chair. "Am I a suspect here?" "Detective?" Michael asked, his voice turning cold. "Because if I am, I think I should call my lawyer." "That's always your right, Mr. Reynolds," Miller said calmly. "We're just trying to get a clear picture. For now, we'd like you to stay in the city. We'll likely have more questions." The door opened and Detective Vance entered. He nodded slightly at Miller. "Mr. Reynolds," Vance said, "your wife is quite upset. Given the circumstances, we've arranged for a victim's advocate to take her to a safe location for the night. Michael shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. What? A safe location? What are you implying? She's my wife. She's coming home with me. I'm afraid that's not possible tonight, Miller said, also standing. His tone was polite but firm, leaving no room for argument. This is a volatile situation. It's for everyone's well-being that you have some space. This is outrageous. You can't keep me from my wife. Michael's face was mottled with rage. The facade had well and truly crumbled. She's clearly not in her right mind. You're listening to the ravings of a hysterical woman. The ravings of a hysterical woman who had the presence of mind to bring us a sample of the substance in question. Vance remarked quietly. That stopped Michael cold. He stared at the two detectives, realizing the chessboard had changed. They weren't buying his act. Not entirely. He was losing control. I want to see my brother, he demanded, changing tactics. He's sedated and in the ICU. Family visits are restricted. We'll have an officer notify you if there's any change. Miller said, for now, it's best if you go home. They escorted a fuming Michael out of the room. As he passed me in the waiting room, he didn't even look at me. He stalked out of the hospital, a man whose perfect life was unraveling at the seams. A woman with a kind, serious face approached me. Danielle, I'm Clara, a victim's advocate. I'm here to take you to a shelter. You'll be safe there. As I followed her out into the night, leaving the bright lights of the hospital behind, I felt a profound exhaustion, but for the first time in weeks, the knot of fear in my stomach had begun to loosen. I had told the truth. The police were involved. I was safe from Michael. For now, the battle was far from over, but I was no longer fighting it alone. The next move was his, and for the first time, I was terrified of what a cornered Michael Reynolds might do. The safe house was a modest, anonymous apartment in a part of the city I rarely ventured into. Clara, the victim's advocate, was a steady, calming presence. She got me settled, made tea, and explained the process. A restraining order against Michael was being prepared. The police would keep me informed. For now, my job was to rest. Rest felt impossible. My phone buzzed incessantly. Unknown numbers. Then, a text from an ID I didn't recognize. Danielle, we need to talk. It's not what you think. Please, just give me 5 minutes. My blood ran cold. He'd already gotten a new number. I showed it to Clara. Don't respond, she said firmly. Block the number. This is classic. He's trying to maintain control, to gaslight you. Any contact gives him an opening. I blocked the number, my hand shaking. An hour later, my phone rang again. This time, it was Sarah. Oh my God, Danny, are you okay? I heard what happened. The whole neighborhood is talking. The police were at your house. They took Michael in for questioning. What? When? I asked, my heart leaping into my throat. About an hour ago. It was all very quiet, but Lisa saw it from her window. Danny, what is going on? I gave her a rushed version of events. Sarah, I'm scared. He's texting me from new numbers. Stay where you are. Don't move. I'm coming to you. True to her word, Sarah arrived 40 minutes later, clutching an overnight bag for me and a determined look on her face. Her presence was a tangible shield. The night was long and sleepless. The next morning, Detective Miller called. Mrs. Reynolds, we've had Michael in for questioning. He's sticking to his story, the prototype supplement. He even produced some forged documents from a shell company. He's good. I'll give him that. My heart sank. So you're letting him go? We're holding him on suspicion of assault for grabbing your arm at the hospital. We have witnesses. It gives us 48 hours. But for the more serious charges, we need the lab results. And we need more. We've gotten a warrant to search the house, his office, his financials. We're looking for the source of this powder. the motive, the lucrative business opportunity. What about Jake? I asked, my voice small, stable, but still unconscious. The doctors are cautiously optimistic. The sample you provided was crucial. It's already at the state lab. We should have a preliminary answer within 24 hours. 24 hours. It felt like a lifetime. The day was an agony of waiting. Sarah and I jumped at every sound. Clara came and went, a steady stream of paperwork and reassurance. Then, in the late afternoon, my phone rang. It was Lisa Milligan. Danielle? Hi. I don't know if this is appropriate, but I found something. After the police left your house, I was walking Buster and I saw a small, black notebook half stuck under a bush in your side yard. It must have fallen out of something. It looks like it might be Michael's. The police have already left the property. I thought you should have it. A notebook. My pulse quickened. Can you bring it to me? Lisa, please? It's important. An hour later, Lisa handed me a small, leather-bound notebook. It was filled with Michael's precise, architectural handwriting, but it wasn't floor plans. It was a log. The first few pages were dated entries from months ago. Dosage, 250 milligrams. Subject, D notes, complains of bitter taste. No noticeable physical effects yet. Patients. Why stomach turned. Subject, D.me, I was an experiment. Then, the entries became more detailed. Increased to 500 milligrams. Subject, D notes, reports headaches. Fatigue, excellent. Suppresses appetite as predicted. Weight loss observed. He was monitoring my weight loss. I felt nauseous. Then, the entries shifted. Acquired new batch. Purity higher. More potent. Need to accelerate timeline. Creditors are impatient. Creditors. So it was about money. Gambling debts? Bad investments? The final entries were the most chilling. They were no longer about me. New subject required. D is too suspicious. J is ideal. Higher metabolism. More susceptible. Willing participant if framed as study aid. J. Jake. He had planned to use Jake all along. My giving Jake the powder hadn't been a derailment of his plan. It had been an acceleration. And then, the last entry, dated the day before the barbecue. Final test tomorrow. Community event. High-stress environment will provide perfect conditions to observe effects under duress. If results are as projected, the buyer is ready. Payment upon delivery of formula and final report. This will clear all debts, and then some. The buyer, the formula, it was a business transaction. I was the initial lab rat, and Jake was the final, public demonstration. Michael wasn't just a poisoner, he was a developer, selling a product designed to do what? 'Cause psychosis? The motive was there, in black and white. Greed. I called Detective Miller, my voice shaking as I read him the entries. Don't touch it anymore, he said, his voice sharp with excitement. We're on our way. This is it. Danielle, this is the motive. The following hours were a blur. The police collected the notebook. The lab results came back. The powder was a complex, synthetic amphetamine derivative, laced with a powerful, experimental hallucinogen. It was designed to be highly addictive and, with prolonged use, to induce paranoia, psychosis, and eventually, complete mental breakdown. The buyer Michael referenced was likely a black market pharmaceutical outfit or a foreign entity looking for a new chemical weapon or a brutal form of crowd control. Michael's lucrative opportunity was trafficking in human suffering. With the notebook and the lab report, the district attorney had enough to charge Michael with attempted murder, aggravated assault, and a host of drug-related charges. He was denied bail. A week later, I was finally allowed to see Jake. He was sitting up in his hospital bed, thinner, paler, but himself. The haunted look was gone from his eyes. Danny, he said, his voice weak but clear. He looked down at his hands. The doctors, they told me, about the powder, about everything. Tears streamed down my face. Jake, I am so sorry. I never meant for you to get hurt. I was just so scared. I know, he said, looking up at me. There was no anger in his eyes, just a profound sadness. He played us both. He played everyone. The police said he was in deep with some bad people. He was going to sell that poison to get himself out of a hole. He shook his head. My own brother. We talked for a long time. I told him everything. It was a painful, cathartic confession. He forgave me. I wasn't sure I deserved it, but he gave it freely. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal, played out in the press. Suburban architect charged in bizarre poisoning plot. My life was dissected in public, but with Sarah, Jake, and even neighbors like Lisa and Tom standing by me, I weathered the storm. 6 months later, I stood in the hallway of the courthouse after Michael's sentencing hearing. He had taken a plea deal, 25 years to life. No parole. He'd avoided a trial, and in exchange, he'd given up the names of his contacts, the buyers, as they led him away in handcuffs. He looked at me. There was no rage left, only a hollow emptiness. The man I had married was gone, if he had ever existed at all. I walked out of the courthouse and into the sunlight. Sarah and Jake were waiting for me on the steps. Jake was doing better, attending daily therapy, slowly rebuilding his life. I had sold the house in Oakwood Estates and used the money to buy a small condo near Sarah. I was freelancing again, my design business slowly picking up. It wasn't a happy ending. There are no clean endings after such betrayal. The fear still visited me in quiet moments. The guilt over Jake was a scar I would carry forever. But as I hugged my friend and my brother-in-law, my family, forged in the crucible of Michael's deception, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time, a sense of peace. The nightmare was over. The truth, no matter how ugly, had set me free. I had trusted my instincts, and in the end, they had saved me. I looked toward the future, not with fear, but with a quiet, hard-won hope. I was Danielle Reynolds, and I was finally, unequivocally, free. 25 years is a long time, a lifetime, really. My hair, once blonde, was now a sleek, stylish silver. The faint lines around my eyes spoke of laughter, not just the tears I'd shed in another life. I stood on the sidewalk outside Verdant, the successful boutique landscape architecture firm I'd built from the ground up. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and distant coffee. I was meeting David, a history professor I'd been seeing for a few months. For dinner, life was good, full. The ghosts of Oakwood Estates were distant, faded memories. I was checking a text from David about the restaurant reservation when a movement in my periphery made me look up. A man stood a few feet away, hunched and shabby, his clothes hanging loosely on a gaunt frame. He looked much older than his years, his face a roadmap of hard living. But the eyes, those slate gray eyes, now sunken and desperate, were unmistakable. Michael. My breath hitched, a purely instinctual reaction, a muscle memory of fear. But as quickly as it came, it vanished, replaced by a profound, almost surreal calm. The monster of my nightmares was just a broken, old man. Danielle, he whispered, his voice raspy and used. I knew I'd find you here. I read about your firm. I said nothing. I simply looked at him, waiting. The fear was gone, and in its place was a cold, distant curiosity. He took a hesitant step forward. You look well. He swallowed hard, his atoms apple-bobbing painfully. I've been out for 6 months. It's hard. No one will hire me. I have nothing. Still, I remained silent. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction of a reaction. This seemed to unnerve him. He'd prepared for anger, for tears, for a scene. My icy stillness was a wall he hadn't anticipated. His composure cracked. I'm sorry. The words burst out of him. Too loud. A couple walking past glanced over, concerned. I'm so sorry, Danielle, for everything. What I did to you, to Jake. I was a different person, a monster. I've paid for it. Every day in that place. I paid. His eyes welled with tears that looked genuine. But I knew better than anyone what a consummate actor he was. He took another step, and now he was close enough for me to smell the stale sweat and despair on him. Please, please, you have to forgive me. Just a word. Something. I can't live with this weight. And then he did it. He sank to his knees on the grimy sidewalk, right there in front of my office. Forgive me, Danielle. Please. I have nothing left. You're all I think about. I looked down at him, this pathetic figure, groveling at my feet. The man who had controlled my every move, who had poisoned me and his own brother, who had shattered my world, was now begging for a scrap of my absolution. And I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, no satisfaction. Just a vast, empty space where my hatred for him used to live. He was simply irrelevant. Get up, Michael, I said, my voice flat, devoid of any emotion. You're making a spectacle of yourself. The kindness he'd hoped for wasn't there. The anger he could have worked with was absent. My utter indifference was a weapon he had no defense against. The pathetic gratitude on his face curdled into something else. Humiliation. Then, rage. He scrambled to his feet, his eyes blazing with a familiar, toxic fire. The mask of remorse shattered completely. You bitch, he hissed, spittle flying from his lips. You self-righteous bitch. You think you're better than me? You ruined my life. Everything was fine until you started snooping. I would have been successful. I would have been rich. This was the real Michael, the one I remembered, the cornered animal. You ruined your own life. Michael, I said, turning to walk away. The conversation was over. He lunged forward and grabbed my arm. His grip, surprisingly strong. Bruising. No, you don't get to walk away. Not after what you did to me. You owe me. The old fear tried to surface, but it was drowned out by a surge of pure defiance. I tried to pull away, but he held fast, his face contorted with hatred. Let her go. Now, the voice was calm, but it carried an authority that cut through the air. David stepped out from the doorway of the building next to mine. He must have been waiting for me and seen the whole thing. He wasn't a large man, but he was solid, and his expression was dangerously quiet. Michael, startled, released my arm. This is none of your business. He snarled. You assaulting a woman on the street makes it my business, David said, stepping closer. He didn't get in Michael's face, but he positioned himself slightly between us. Danielle, are you all right? I'm fine. David, the use of my name, the obvious familiarity, enraged Michael further. Who is this? Your latest idiot? Has he told you about me? Has he told you what a lying, manipulative whore you are? David didn't flinch. I know everything I need to know, and I know you need to walk away, right now. Or what? Michael sneered, puffing out his chest in a pathetic attempt at intimidation. You'll call the cops? Go ahead. I just got out. They won't do anything. I wasn't thinking of the police, David said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. I was thinking of me, and I assure you, the consequences for me will be much more immediate and personal. He didn't make a threatening gesture, but the promise of violence in his eyes was unmistakable and, frankly, shocking coming from my gentle professor. Michael saw it too. He saw the genuine intent in David's gaze. He looked from David's resolute face to my expressionless one, the fight drained out of him, replaced by the cowering fear of a man who had been at the bottom of the prison hierarchy for decades. He was a bully, and bullies fold when faced with real, unflinching strength. He took a stumbling step back, muttering curses under his breath. This isn't over. He spat, but the words were empty, the threat hollow. It is over, I said, speaking directly to him for the last time. If I ever see you near me again, I won't just call the police. I'll remind them of your parole conditions. Now get out of my sight. He stared at us for one more hate-filled moment, then turned and shuffled away, a broken ghost disappearing into the twilight. David immediately turned to me, his concern erasing the hardness from his face. Danielle, my God, are you sure you're okay? That was him. I took a deep, shuddering breath, the adrenaline finally starting to subside. I looked in the direction Michael had gone. There was nothing there. No ghost. No monster. Just a sad end to a sad story. I'm okay, I said. And this time, I truly meant it. I looked at David, at the protective, fierce loyalty in his eyes. It was appealing. Actually, I'm better than okay. I slipped my hand into his. Now, about that dinner reservation. I'm suddenly very hungry. He smiled, a warm, relieved smile, and squeezed my hand. As we walked away, I didn't look back. The past was finally, definitively, behind me, and the future, for the first time in a very long time, felt wide open and full of light. Whether David would be a permanent part of that future was a question for another day. For tonight, his steady presence was more than enough. David didn't press me for details that night. Over a quiet dinner at a small Italian restaurant, he simply provided a calm, steady presence. He talked about his work, a funny anecdote about a student's bizarre thesis topic, anything to gently pull me back from the edge of the traumatic encounter. He didn't try to be a hero, he was just there. And his quiet, unwavering support was a balm I hadn't realized I needed. When he walked me to my door, he paused on the steps. "I'd like to see you again," he said, his hands tucked into his pockets. "But only when you're ready. No pressure." "I'd like that," I said, and found that I genuinely meant it. "But David, what you did back there, the way you looked at him, I've never seen that side of you." He gave a small, somewhat sheepish smile. "I have 2 older brothers. You learn to project a certain deterrence if you want to survive childhood, and the thought of him putting his hands on you." His jaw tightened momentarily. Let's just say it brought out some old instincts. I leaned forward and kissed his cheek. "Thank you for the instincts and for the dinner." The following weeks were a test, but not in the way I'd feared. The shadow of Michael's appearance lingered, but it was faint. I reported the incident to my parole officer contact, who assured me they would pay Michael a visit and reinforce the conditions of his release. There was no sign of him. It seemed my threat, and David's intervention, had worked. David, true to his word, applied no pressure. Our dates were easy and light-hearted. We visited museums, went for long walks in the park, and spent hours talking in cozy coffee shops. He was fascinated by my work with Verdant, and I loved listening to his passionate, detailed stories about historical events as if they were unfolding in front of him. He was solid, kind, and he made me laugh. It was simple, and after a lifetime of complexity with Michael, simple was a revelation. He never tried to push past the boundaries I set. A goodnight kiss at the door, a warm hand to hold mine during a movie. It was all slow, respectful, and it made me feel safe, cherished, even. One evening, about 2 months after the incident, we were at my apartment, sharing a bottle of wine. The conversation turned, as it sometimes did, to the past. "You never really talk about him," David said gently, not meaning Michael, but the idea of marriage, of a shared life before. "You don't have to. I want you to know that whatever that was, it doesn't define what this can be." He gestured between us. I took a sip of wine, considering. "I know it doesn't, but maybe it's important that you know. The woman I was with him, she was scared. She doubted herself constantly. She thought control was a form of love." I looked at him. "I'm not that woman anymore. What happened with Michael, it didn't break me. It freed me. It taught me to trust my gut, to value my own peace above all else." David listened, his gaze soft. "And what does your gut say now?" I smiled. "It says you're a good man, and it says I'm happy." He reached across the table and took my hand. "That's all I want. Your happiness. It was later that week that I got the final confirmation that the chapter was truly closed. My parole officer contact called me. Just an update. Ms. Reynolds. Michael Reynolds has left the state, packed up his few belongings, and took a bus to the southwest. Arizona. We believe. His parole has been transferred. He told his supervising officer here that there was nothing left for him in this city. He won't be bothering you again. I thanked her and hung up. I felt a final, quiet click, like a lock sliding shut. He was gone. The threat was truly over. That night, David took me to a new restaurant downtown to celebrate a publishing contract he'd just secured. The atmosphere was buzzing, and we were both in high spirits. Over dessert, a rich chocolate torte we shared. He looked at me, his expression turning uncharacteristically serious. Danielle, he began, these last few months have been incredible. You are incredible. I felt a flutter of anticipation. This was it. The question about making things official, about a commitment. He took a deep breath. I know you value your independence, and I would never, ever want to crowd you or make you feel like you need anything other than what you've built for yourself. I know that, David. I said softly. Good, he said, a warm smile breaking through his seriousness. Because my department has approved a year-long research sabbatical in Oxford. They want me to work on turning my thesis into a book. I leave in 3 months. The flutter turned into a swoop. Oxford. A year. It was a world away. He hurried on. I want you to know that this doesn't have to change anything between us. We can figure it out. Visits, calls, or... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Or, if you wanted, you could come with me. There's a vibrant design community there. You could take a sabbatical too, explore, or just take a year to just be. With me. He looked at me, his heart in his eyes. It was a generous, beautiful offer. It was a future, laid out at my feet. I looked at this good, kind man who had come into my life at just the right time. He had been my protector and my friend. He was offering me an adventure, a partnership. But as I looked at him, I also looked at myself, at the life I had painstakingly built, at Verdant, which was my creation, my passion, at my hard-won peace and independence. I had spent so many years living under the shadow of a man's plans. First Michael's toxic control, and then the long, solitary journey of recovery. I had just finally, truly, started living for myself. I reached across the table and took his hand. David, it's a magnificent offer, and a part of me loves the idea of it, but he nodded, his smile tinged with a hint of sadness, as if he'd been expecting this. But it's my adventure, not necessarily yours. It's not that, I said. It's that my adventure is here, right now. I spent so long running from a life, and then building a new one. I'm not ready to leave it. I love what we have, but I need to love me, and the life I've made, a little bit more. He brought my hand to his lips and kissed it. I understand. Truly, I do. And I admire you for it more than I can say. So what does that mean for us? I asked, my heart aching just a little. It means, he said, his eyes warm, that I will be in Oxford for a year, and you will be here, being the incredible Danielle Reynolds that you are. And we will see. The world is smaller than it used to be, and if this is real, he gestured between us, then it can withstand some distance. No promises, no expectations, just we'll see. It wasn't a storybook ending. It was messy and uncertain, but it was honest. And for a woman who had survived on lies, honesty was the most solid foundation possible. I smiled. We'll see. As I walked home that night, alone, I felt not a sense of loss, but one of profound peace. I had faced my past and watched it slink away. I had a thriving present, and the future? It was a blank canvas, full of possibility. And for the first time, that thought was exhilarating, not frightening. The choice was mine, and mine alone, and that was the greatest gift of all. The 3 months before David left for Oxford passed in a bittersweet blur. We made a conscious decision to soak up our time together, filling our weekends with trips to the coast, picnics in the park, and quiet evenings that felt more precious because they were numbered. There was an unspoken tenderness to our connection, a quiet acknowledgement that what we had was real, but that our individual paths, for now, were leading us in different directions. The night before his flight, we had a simple dinner at my apartment. The air was thick with unspoken words. "I'll call you as soon as I'm settled," he said, pushing the food around his plate. "The time difference will be a beast." I replied, trying to keep my voice light. "We'll manage." He looked up at me, his gaze intense. "Danielle, this past year meeting you, it's been—" "I know," I said softly, cutting him off. I was afraid if he said more, my resolve would crumble. "It's been exactly what I needed." He nodded, understanding. We finished dinner in a comfortable, if melancholic, silence. The next morning, I drove him to the airport. We stood at the departure's curb, a scene from 1,000 movies, yet it felt uniquely ours. No dramatic goodbyes, he said, pulling me into a tight hug. He smelled of soap and the faint scent of clean laundry from his suitcase. "This is just a see you later." I hugged him back, memorizing the solid, safe feel of him. "See you later, David." He kissed me, a deep, lingering kiss that held a universe of hope and unspoken promises. Then, he picked up his bag, gave me one last, brilliant smile, and walked through the automatic doors without looking back. It was the perfect exit, clean, strong, and full of faith. I got in my car and sat there for a long time, watching the planes take off into the clear blue sky. A chapter was ending, but for the first time in my life, the end of a chapter didn't feel like a loss. It felt like a necessary turn of the page. The first few weeks were the hardest. The silence in my apartment was louder, but I threw myself into my work. Verdant landed its biggest contract yet, a citywide green space revitalization project. It was all-consuming and exhilarating. I was building a legacy, not just a business. David and I kept our word. We talked every Sunday, his afternoons to my mornings. The conversations were easy, full of stories about his research in the dusty archives of Oxford libraries and my challenges with city bureaucrats. We were living our separate, full lives and sharing them with each other. The distance wasn't a chasm. It was a bridge that connected two different worlds. 6 months into his sabbatical, he sent me a photo. It was of a tiny, perfect cottage with a thatched roof and a garden overflowing with lavender, nestled in the Cotswolds. The message read, "Found my writing retreat. Reminded me of you. Peaceful, beautiful, and stronger than it looks." I stared at the picture for a long time. I could imagine myself there, walking through those gardens, the English mist in the air. It was a lovely dream. But as I looked out my office window at the sleek, modern skyline of my city, I felt no pull. My roots were here. They had grown deep and strong in this soil. The year Mark approached. David's sabbatical was ending. Our weekly calls began to carry a new weight, a silent question hanging in the digital space between us. He flew back on a crisp autumn day, almost a year to the day after he had left. I waited for him at the arrival's gate, my heart pounding a nervous rhythm against my ribs. And then I saw him. He looked the same, but different, a little older, a little more weathered in the best possible way. His face broke into a huge smile when he saw me. He dropped his bag and wrapped me in an embrace that felt like coming home. We held each other for a long time, right there in the middle of the bustling terminal, oblivious to the crowd. In the car, he finally asked the question. "So," he said, his voice careful, "what now?" I took a deep breath, my hand steady on the steering wheel. "I've thought about nothing else for months, David, and the answer is, I don't know." He looked at me, his expression open, waiting. "I love you," I said, the words feeling true and right as they left my lips. "I think I have for a while. And the life you offered in Oxford, it's beautiful. but it's your life. And my life is here. Verdant is my dream. This city, with all its noise and chaos, is my home. I pulled the car over so I could look at him properly. I can't ask you to give up your career there, and I won't give up mine here. Not even for you. He was quiet for a moment, taking it in. Then, a slow smile spread across his face. Who said anything about giving anything up? I blinked. What do you mean? Danielle, I'm a tenured professor. I have summers off. Long sabbaticals, every 7 years. Oxford loved my work. They've offered me a visiting lecture position for 1 semester every other year. He reached for my hand. I'm not asking you to choose. I'm asking you to let me back into the life you've built, the life you love. My home is where you are. And if that's here, then here is where I'll be. We can travel together in the summers. We can have adventures. But our home base, that's your call. Tears welled in my eyes, but they were tears of relief, of joy. He wasn't asking me to sacrifice my hard-won self. He was asking to join me in it. So, I said, laughing through the tears, you're saying you're okay with being the boyfriend of a workaholic landscape architect who is terrifyingly good at being alone? I wouldn't have it any other way, he said, leaning over to kiss me, as long as she saves a little time for me. I think, I said, my heart feeling fuller than it ever had. That can be arranged. I put the car back in drive and merged into the flow of traffic, heading home. The future was no longer a blank canvas or a fork in the road. It was a path we would walk together, each of us strong and complete on our own, but choosing, every day, to walk side by side. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was better. It was a real beginning, and it was entirely, wonderfully, ours.